Good evening. Welcome to Football League World TV. It's 8 p.m. and that means it's time for the transfer zone once again. The clock's ticking down until the 11 p.m. deadline. We've now less than 3 hours to go and the deals are coming in thick and fast. I'm delighted to be joined by Toby Wilding, my colleague. How are you finding it today? Is it as hectic view as it is for me?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Plenty of deals to keep on top of, and going to be really good to get stuck into it. A few of them now, but obviously, you still feel like there's plenty more to do in those last few hours. So, going to be a lot to really keep an eye on. I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds over the next few hours up until 11 o'clock midnight.
Just a regular day of EFL transfer deadline day, and the deals will probably be coming after the deadline as well into the early hours. Well, as ever, we are broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you got any comments about the latest transfer news, then please feel free to leave them and we'll feature them in the show. Let's get straight into it. Now, in the last hour, there's been a swap deal reported between Championship rivals Reading and Stoke City. Liam Moore looks to be heading to the Bet365 Stadium. He's been stripped of his captaincy in the last 2 weeks by the Royals. He's expressed a desire to leave after a few years at the club. Going in the opposite direction looks to be Tom Ince. He's had somewhat of a reprieve in the Stoke side in recent weeks. He scored 3 goals in 11 games this season, but he looks to be heading to the Select Car Leasing Stadium. He's out of contract at the end of the season at Stoke. Toby, is this a good move for both parties? You know, Reading getting rid of a player, albeit he's very talented. He doesn't want to be at the club, and Reading are set to add someone who's been showing in the last few weeks. He's got some creative talent left in the Championship.
Yeah, I would argue it's perhaps a slightly better deal for Reading than Stoke, sort of for the reasons you're touching on there, in terms of Moore's situation at Reading in comparison to Ince's situation at Stoke. Obviously, we saw that statement that came out about Moore not that long ago about his request to leave the club and stripping him of the captaincy. And, you know, at that point, it seemed as though he was facing a very uncertain future at Reading, which now looks to be coming to an end. And I think when you sort of consider the financial situation that the Royals are in at the minute, it's really hard for them to get business done, given the sort of limits on what they can and can't do. So I think that to be able to get out a player who it seems doesn't want to be there in exchange for a player who really, as we say, has been coming into some good form and could really lift the Royals from an attacking sense, could be quite a useful piece of business for Reading in that sense. For Stoke, obviously, as you say, it's a bit more interesting given Ince's out of contract. It's not a terrible deal for them, but like we sort of say, and like we've seen over the past few weeks, Ince has really picked up a bit of form. So you did wonder whether that might have, opened up the potential to a longer term future for him at Stoke beyond the end of the season. But that now looks as though it isn't going to be the case, and he's off to Reading to see what he can do for them. And again, I think that makes it a sort of a good deal for the Royals. Slightly interesting, given you sort of felt maybe the emphasis would be more on defence for them, given the sort of struggles with the goals they've been conceding recently. But even so, to get a player who's been playing like Ince can't be a sort of bad deal for them, given the circumstances and the pressure they're under and who they're moving out in the opposite direction. So yeah, I think Reading have done reasonably well there, and Stoke won't be too disappointed to have someone with Moore's experience and ability at that level in their squad either.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting deal for both parties. Perhaps leaves Reading a little bit short at the back, but that's maybe something that they can address in the final few hours. Another Championship club like Reading who are struggling at the bottom end of the table are Cardiff, but they are closing in on a loan move for Middlesbrough striker Uche Ikpeazu. They did want Naki Wells in the last 24 hours, but that deal appears to be dead in the water, and they've moved on to Ikpeazu. Chris Wilder did confirm the interest in the Borough striker a few days ago. He slipped down the pecking order following the signings of Aaron Connolly and following Balogun this month. He's scored 2 times in 20 appearances since joining from Wycombe in the summer. Slipped down the pecking order though, and he's been coming off the bench in recent weeks under Wilder's management. Toby, do you think this is a decent signing for Cardiff? Obviously, we know Kiefer Moore should be signing for Bournemouth in the next few hours. He's a very much a like-for-like replacement, Ikpeazu. Do you think it's a decent one until the end of the season and somewhat of a kind of a shop window kind of move for him to see what he can potentially get in the summer.
Yeah, it could be a good deal for Cardiff. This, I mean, it shows how quickly things can change for players in football. I guess obviously Piazza only joining Middlesbrough in the summer from Wycombe, and it's not quite worked out for him as he probably would have hoped. Sort of been limited for opportunities. Certainly since the change of manager with Chris Wilder coming in to take over from Neil Warnock, and as you say, with those players that have been brought in this month already with Connolly and Balogun, given the quality that they have and the fact that their parent clubs are going to expect them to be played, you don't really see Ikpeazu getting more opportunities at the Riverside Stadium during the second half of this season. So in that sense, it could be a good move for him. I think it could be a good move for Cardiff. Obviously, it was an excellent sort of start to life in the Welsh capital for Jordan Hugill with his goal yesterday. But beyond that, you look at sort of Cardiff's other striking options. James Collins hasn't really got going there this season. Max Watters, we're not really sure how much he's going to be able to produce, given he's literally only just come back from that loan spell with MK Dons. This is sort of his first real opportunity to prove himself in the Championship. So there's a few unknowns there. So having someone with that sort of presence and that influence that Ikpeazu can have could be really useful for Cardiff. And I mean, you sort of go back to the goal that he scored against Mansfield in the FA Cup earlier this month for Borough. There's a quality player in there who can come up with some spectacular moments. And if he can produce things like that again whilst he's playing for the Bluebirds, then he could be a really useful player for them in the second half of the season. And then obviously, given he looks to be out of favour at Middlesbrough, that could really open the door for a longer term move for him in the summer, given it's hard to probably see him forcing his way back into the sort of picture at the Riverside Stadium.
Yeah, he's definitely one that should be happening very soon. Kiefer Moore's deal has just been confirmed to Bournemouth in the last 10 minutes, so you'd expect that one to be moving pretty quickly. Now, let's move into League One. Sunderland look set to have a very busy night. The links of Jermaine Defoe coming back in, Fleetwood Town midfielder Jay Mateta, he's said to be in talks to be covered on the last transfer zone, and we've got a regular Wayne Walding Fulham fan here. Good evening, Ben and Toby. Hope you're well from a Fulham fan. And tied into that, Sunderland do want a Fulham player. There's a loan deal on the table for Terence Congolo. He's a 27-year-old Netherlands international, 4 caps for his country, but he's not played this season after recovering from a somewhat lengthy injury. He's played 4 times in the under-23s for Fulham, but he's yet to have an appearance in the senior team. Despite a lack of game time, Toby, do you think this would be a bit of a coup for League One level? He went for obviously £12 million around 4 years ago when he signed for Huddersfield Town when they were in the Premier League. Sunderland, obviously, they leaked 6 goals at the weekend against Bolton. Clearly, a need to strengthen it in defence, isn't there? He can cover at left back. He's primarily a centre back. If he's fully fit, if they can get him back to fitness, surely this is a very good signing for League One level if it goes through.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really big coup for Sunderland. I think there'll be a few teams who might be looking at this and sort of kicking themselves that they haven't got to it before then, because, as you say, there's an element of risk with any player who's been out of action for as long as Congolo has in terms of how long is it going to take to get them match fit. But when you sort of look at the experience he has, not just in the Championship, but the Premier League, as you mentioned, to be bringing that sort of ability to League One could be really useful. And obviously, he did sort of impress. He was solid at times at those sort of levels. So it's not like he's not been playing for no good reason. It has literally been down to injury. So if he can get himself fit and playing to the level he was before those sorts of issues emerged, then he could still be a really solid signing for Sunderland. And obviously at 27 years old, there's still a good chunk of time left in his career for him to really use this as, again, another one who could potentially, if it is a loan move, turn this into something of a shop window opportunity for himself if he can catch the eye there. And yeah, absolutely, you do feel as though sort of the result at the weekend, the 6-0 at Bolton, has perhaps added a bit more incentive for Sunderland to get a bit of business done like this, bring in someone who can really shore up that defence a bit further. So in that sense, I think they are pulling off a really smart move there, and one that sort of shows even despite that setback, they are still a force to be reckoned with in League One, as can't really be doubted when you look at the size of the club.
Yeah, they're definitely an attractive club to go to as far as Congolo's concerned, to try and get some first team football. Be interested to see if that one goes through. Sticking with Sunderland, there could be some outgoings ahead of the 11 p.m. deadline. Both Lyndon Gooch and Tom Flanagan have been linked in local reports with potential departures from the club tonight. Shrewsbury is said to be interested in both. Gooch has played 24 times in a number of positions in League One this season. Flanagan appeared 25 times, but obviously with Congolo's deal on the table, that could push him down the pecking order. Toby, would it perhaps be a surprise if one or if not both end up somewhere like Shrewsbury? They've obviously turned their form around recently, but they're still not expected to make a playoff push. Would you expect bigger clubs to be interested in this duo, especially Gooch, who's been a key figure for Sunderland in recent years?
Yeah, I am a bit surprised, almost to the extent of that Sunderland are willing to let these players go. And I think, as you say, both have been heavily involved for the club this season. So it does seem like a bit of a risk for them to do that. And especially when you consider the fact that they're working without a manager at the minute. They're doing this business without a manager. And it's really hard, I guess, for them to predict what any manager looking at the club as a potential candidate to take over might be thinking when it comes to what they want from this squad. And are they going to like the fact that Sunderland are allowing these players to leave their squad without getting the sort of verdict and the say-so of whoever might be coming in to take charge of the squad, especially two players who, as we say, really sort of have been key players for Sunderland this season. Beyond that, given this potential talk of a Shrewsbury move, I think there is a bit of a surprise there as well, in terms of sort of that it isn't a club maybe further up League One or maybe even in the Championship who are looking at these two when you sort of consider the experience they've got. And they have shown to be fairly reliable players for Sunderland during their time there. I think Flanagan in particular has been linked with Championship clubs in previous windows. So that would make this another big coup for Shrewsbury. But we perhaps shouldn't be quite as surprised as that as maybe we are making out. Because when you sort of look back at some of their business that they sort of did in the summer and going back to those sorts of times, perhaps it hasn't always worked out, but they have been able to pull off some really eye-catching deals that have sort of shown their own intent and ambition over at Shrewsbury. So in that sense, it's perhaps no surprise that they are able to get a couple of coups here from Sunderland if those deals go through.
Yeah, they've definitely been in decent form this month, and they're trying to strengthen their hand in the relegation battle. Transfer saga that's been going on for quite a while now is the Josh Bowler situation at Blackpool. He's on a contract till the end of the season at Bloomfield Road with the option to extend by a year, but it seems like there's a late battle between Bournemouth, who seem to be after a plethora of talent before the deadline, and Nottingham Forest are still keen. Those two clubs are trying to battle out his signature. And a rumoured arrival at Blackpool is Morgan Rogers of Manchester City, which could pave the way for Bowler to leave to one of these two clubs. Rogers played the first half of the season for Bournemouth. He signed a loan deal with the option to make it permanent, but after just one goal in 15 games, just one of those being a start for Bournemouth, he's set to join Blackpool for the rest of the season. Firstly, Toby, is that a good, exciting signing for Blackpool? And on Bowler as well, surely if it's one of the two clubs, it's got to be Forest, considering the amount of attacking talent that Bournemouth seems to be bringing in. The likes of Siriki Dembele and Todd Cantwell, seem to be on the verge of joining Bournemouth. So surely they can't add Bowler to that, because there'll be surely too many players for 2 or 3 positions.
Yeah, to start with on Rodgers, I think that's a really good signing for Blackpool. I mean, obviously it's not quite worked out for him as we expected at Bournemouth during the first half of this season, but you look at the pedigree he's got coming through the Manchester City youth ranks, and also sort of what he was doing for Lincoln in League One last season. He's a really high quality player who can produce a lot going forward for clubs. So for Blackpool to be the ones who come in and get them feels like something of a coup and a bit of a statement of intent for them when you consider sort of the number and some of the calibre of clubs in the Championship that have been linked with him since it sort of came out that there was a chance he would be being recalled from Bournemouth by City and being sent out elsewhere. In terms of then what that might mean for Josh Bowler and going elsewhere, I do think that Forest would look the most likely, as you say, with sort of the number of players in those attacking areas that Bournemouth have at the minute and look like they're going to get with the likes of Cantwell and Dembele, you'd say from his perspective, it certainly seems to make sense to go to Forest, where he might have more of a chance, especially now that the talk seems to be that it's been reported that Jed Wallace won't be making his own move to the City ground. So that too sort of perhaps enhances Forest's need to get this deal done, more than Bournemouth's. And I think the other thing with regards to Bournemouth is they've spent considerable amounts, it seems, on some of these players that they've been bringing in. So with Blackpool seemingly holding firm on their asking price that these clubs are going to have to meet if they're going to get the chance to sign Bowler, you also wonder whether Bournemouth, with what they've already invested this month on some really impressive deals, whether they can actually afford to go out and pay that money to get him as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a saga that's going to be going right up to the deadline, you feel. It's one to keep an eye out on. One of Bournemouth and Forest potential promotion rivals at QPR lining up a late loan move for Jeff Hendrick of Newcastle. The Republic of Ireland internationals played just 3 Premier League games this season, scored once, linked with Middlesbrough in the last week, but that doesn't seem to have come to fruition, and reports in the Northeast are suggesting that Mark Warburton's side could be set to sign Hendrick. Is this a good potential move, Toby? We know what Hendrick can bring, at championship level when he played for Burnley for all those years. A lot of energy in that midfield. Is this going to be a good addition if it comes off?
Yeah, I think it could be for QPR. That sort of championship and Premier League experience, of course, in that midfield could be really useful for QPR when they're sort of looking to push on for promotion in the next few months. I think as well, obviously, you look back to his time in the Championship before, he can get goals and he can create chances and assists at this level. So when you sort of consider the attacking options that QPR have got, if Hendrick can get back to his best, then the likes of Dykes, Austin, Chair could be relishing sort of a link up with him if he can sort of produce the form that he's sort of shown in this level in the past. And obviously, I think it sort of makes sense, Newcastle, they're wanting to get players in to wage their own battle against relegation from the Premier League. So they need to move players out to sort of create that space in the squad for those deals to happen for themselves. So you would imagine they'll be willing to sort of facilitate a move such as this. And you'd like to think that players such as Hendrick are going to want to go out and get that game time rather than, sit on the sidelines when they might not even be getting into Newcastle's 25-man squad when you consider who might be coming in. So if in that sense, it does seem as though it ought to be a move that works for everybody and could prove to be a really useful one for QPR, who are far from out of this automatic promotion race.
Yeah, Newcastle do seem to be clearing the deck somewhat. The likes of Kieran Clark and Jamal Lewis have been linked to championship moves today, Middlesbrough and Birmingham respectively, but we understand they've turned down those potential moves. We've got a comment here from a Burton Albion fan, Ollie, asking if he thinks Burton will bring any players in. They've lost Daniel Jebison in the last 24 hours back to Sheffield United, and today they've lost Tom O'Connor, one of the midfielders, to Moneybags Wrexham of the National League, splashing out a considerable fee for that level to bring O'Connor in. He scored 5 goals in 18 appearances for midfield. Toby, that's a big blow for Burton, isn't it? Losing not only Jebison, which was kind of almost inevitable due to his upturning form, and with Sheffield United's injuries to Brewster and Musa leaving, but also O'Connor, who's kind of been converted into somewhat of a scorer from midfield, having not been that kind of player throughout his career.
Yeah, that's a big blow for Burton to lose 2 players as influential as that, so close to the end of the window, and it really does put pressure on them. In response to sort of Ollie's question about bringing any players in, it's obviously going to be tough at this time. I mean, one that is maybe worth keeping an eye out on, familiar name to Burton fans, is Harry Chapman. Obviously, they've had him on loan from Blackburn at the end of the season. He's very much a fringe player there. There's sort of been talk today about Tony Mowbray looking to sanction sort of departures for some of those players on the edge of the first team squad to go out on loan or wherever. And if that is to happen, then because of the 2-club rule, players can only play for 2 clubs in a season, and the fact that Chapman made a few substitute appearances for Blackburn back at the start of the campaign and then went on to play for Burton, that means that his only potential destination for the rest of this season would be the Pirelli Stadium. So whether or not a move sort of transpires, obviously that's completely down to Burton. If they want him, then you do get that impression that the move could be there for them to do, and there's not really any other clubs who can come in and challenge them for Chapman, because no one else can play this season due to FIFA rules. So that might be one to keep an eye on. But as with any club, you imagine they will have to have other targets identified. And as you say, they may well have been aware, certainly with regards to Jefferson, that a recall could happen this month. So you would like to think that they'll have been prepared and had other targets identified in case that did happen. Then they could move quickly and sort of bring someone in to fill that void.
Yeah, you're seeing Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank will be working late to try and get replacements for both players in. It's funny you mentioned Blackburn, Toby and Harry Chapman. I was going to ask you about Ryan Giles. You being a Blackburn fan, Giles is about to sign for Blackburn tonight until the end of the season on loan. He's been with Cardiff, obviously, in the first half of the season. I think he got 9 assists for the Bluebirds before being recalled. Is that a somewhat of a game-changing signing? Obviously, he's had spells before Cardiff in the Championship with the likes of, Rotherham and Coventry, but he's really come into his own this season at Cardiff, hasn't he? And he could provide something. Obviously, you've got Harry Chapman down at the left-hand side when he's fit, but Giles could potentially offer something a lot more different, couldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a signing that sort of really does quite excite me from a Blackburn perspective. I mean, being honest, I think coming into today, was maybe sort of, it sounded like there might be a bit more business. Giles looks like the most likely to come now from what's being reported, and that is a very good signing for Blackburn. I mean, you look at sort of what he was doing in a struggling Cardiff team during the first half of this season. He really stood out there, and I'm thinking back to sort of when Cardiff played at Ewood Park and were thrashed 5-1 back in the sort of early weeks of the season. Giles came on at half time in that game, and for me was the only Cardiff player who really came away from that game with any sort of genuine credit. So, to bring him in is a really exciting deal based on sort of what I've seen from him. And 9 assists in the Championship for Cardiff this season. You think that's going to be the sort of return that someone like Ben Brereton Diaz is going to relish playing alongside, especially when you combine that with the creativity of John Buckley, and now that he looks like he's going to stay, Joe Rothwell, presuming Rovers do come back into the side. That's a whole other rant I could go into that we probably don't have time for now. We've only just over 2.5 hours to go until the deadline. So yeah, Ryan Giles, really exciting signing for Blackburn, and one who you feel can really make things happen for them in this promotion push in the next few months.
Yeah, he's one who can play on the wing as well if Mowbray decides to go and revert back to a winger system. Obviously he's playing with wing backs at the minute. Well, that concludes the final transfer zone of the mums. Obviously, there's still a few hours left of the window and lots of business to be done across the EFL. So keep your eyes peeled across social media as well as Football League Wales platforms to see who your team is bringing in. For now, though, me and Toby are going to work furiously until the 11 p.m. deadline and beyond to cover the plethora of deals happening. So until then, we'll see you later.